Today, we are starting with earnings results because the focus is back on where corporate performance is, in Delta getting a big bump in the session here on the back of their results, up about 4.5%. Better than expected results for the airline as they see demand pick up. They posted a loss of $1.23 a share, but they do say they expect to return to a profit this quarter as they see sales return to near 97% of pre-pandemic levels. Delta CEO Ed Bastian telling Yahoo Finance he is ramping up capacity, even in the face of high fuel prices. Take a listen.
Airlines need to make sure they can cover their costs in the and as well as all costs, labor and any other cost factor that may be going up. So we're seeing in this current environment, prices are up. And it's been based, the health of the demand environment is what's supporting it.
And Brian, Ed Bastian speaking to our Brad Smith there. The number that kind of stood out to me here when we're talking about fuel prices is just how quickly the numbers have gone up. Yes, we know fuel prices have been rising, but the average fuel price Delta was $2.79 a gallon in Q1. They're expecting that to jump to $3.35 on the high side for Q2. But Ed Bastian saying, look, we're having to deal with that, but the demand is continuing to support it.
Yeah, and when you see the bleed through of higher oil prices into tickets, people will still go out and pay for those more expensive tickets. And that's because of that robust demand that they're seeing. And, you're seeing headlines coming out of the earnings call, which is happening right now, that Delta management kind of anticipates actually that the mask mandate will be phased out in the near future. They see that as encouraging. Maybe that's going to give a little bit of a slight boost to demand for tickets as well, as people feel a little bit less concerned about hitting the airs again. Now, of course, what's interesting here going forward is just the labor aspect of all of this, right? Because our viewers might be wondering, I don't really care about how much Delta's making. I just want to know if my flight's going to get canceled, which a lot of people have had to endure and will endure probably into this Easter weekend. That's because of the shortage of pilots. And Ed Bastian was saying on the call that that pilot shortage issue isn't likely to work itself out in the next 1 or even 2 years. So that could be a concern for possible flight cancellations in the future. So, again, we're trying to think about what's going forward for these airlines. And, it seems like there are issues that are structural that aren't going to be relieved anytime soon.
And we're seeing some of the other travel names up on these results today, by the way, too, Brian. And, we have heard from so many airlines, travel names, hotels, that there are people who are just itching to travel again. And they're willing to your point, put up the cost, pay the price, even if it's higher, to be able to continue forward with those summer travel plans. Business travel hasn't necessarily kept up on that demand, but it feels like we're starting to see a shift on that front. When you look at Delta's results here, Delta's saying that business travel is starting to return. Domestic corporate sales for the quarter were at 50% of pre-pandemic levels. So not quite where things were in 2019, but they are catching up. And here's the number that I think a lot of investors are going to be looking to as well, because we know when business travelers travel, they do tend to pay for the higher costs. Recovery for premium cabins outpacing that of the main cabin. At least that's the word from Delta. So that's not to say that's all business travelers, but people are willing to pay that premium price right now to travel, whether that's for business or for leisure.
Yeah, and you do wonder how that's going to affect the other industry movement that we're seeing. Obviously, the big airline story before earnings and probably through earnings is still going to be JetBlue for Spirit getting in the way of that Frontier merger, because it seemed like low cost was a very unappetizable model because of the premium travel that was really surging before the pandemic. But that story changed very much when the pandemic happened. So we'll see if that kind of picks up, especially hopefully as international travel picks up again in the future. But one other point I want to make here on Delta before we go is that it's just so nice to see an earnings report that refers to the quarter as the quarter ended in March, as opposed to like Q1, 2021, 2022, these like weird tech companies that call it like Q3, 2022, even though we're in the beginning of the year. It's just like, I wish more companies would just keep it more standard like that, but I'll leave that.
Well, they're not all uniform, right? It's
no, they're not. That
January
makes no sense.
to March is not always Q1 for every company.
Right, right. But then again, you get some of these weird tech companies that report later into the earnings season, and they're like, "Oh, well, for the quarter ended April, whatever. Like this is our third quarter, 2020." It makes no sense. Just say when the quarter that you're reporting for ended. Make it easier for all of us reporters.